So I'm here with Chuck Starks, the author of Get Rich While Black Without Being an Athlete, Entertainer, or Drug Dealer. How are you doing today?
And things are good. Things are good. How you doing?
Man, excellent. What made you write that book? I feel it has a very controversial title almost.
Well, I wrote it because I mean, if you get a copy of the book, you'll see that I started out being in business. I had my own business, and like most people, I wanted to be wealthy, rich, famous, whatever. Started out in the computer business, had my own company, was a bona fide millionaire at 34 years old, and after about 10 years of being in that business, I had some concerns with my business partners and actually went broke. So I was a millionaire at 34 and I was bankrupt at 45. And I knew there had to be a better way. Basically, I was, having concerns with my business partners, with contracts. And to me, a lot of that was because of the color of my skin, being black. And so I decided to go in a different direction and basically got into residential income property and buying it and being a landlord and manager and feel that that's really the only way to go for Black people who want to be successful. And we, in our communities, we see the athletes, the entertainers, and unfortunately, we see the drug dealers and thinking that's the only way out when it's almost impossible to be an athlete or an entertainer and actually make a living. And then if you're unfortunate enough to be a drug dealer, you know how that is. So I thought it was important to let people know that you can make it without, trying to be an athlete, which everybody wants to be, or an entertainer. And basically, I came up with a way, and I think it's the only proven way that you can have control of what you do, have an unlimited amount of income. Basically, I see my system as my book is really an FPS, a financial positioning system, just like a GPS, global positioning system. You can decide exactly how much you want to make and have a very successful life. And we talked about the pitfalls of being Black in business. I started my business from scratch on my 29th birthday. And I was fortunate. I had been in the computer business. I had some contacts and the business grew. But at a certain point, it seemed like the more successful I got, the more problems I had. And then I was very successful in the Inc. 500 company, grew up to, we're doing a little over 5 million a year with 45 employees. And then I had some concerns, I'd say, with my business partners in my contracting, which was with governments.
You were talking about, starting your computer business. Why wasn't your computer business successful?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. There was a situation with a manager for one of my for the companies that actually the organizations I was dealing with, and to me it was strictly racism. And he caused one of my business partners to cancel my relationship, and I went out of business when I was 45 years old. And I see this as a problem with Black people. A lot of people don't notice it, but normally in your 30s and 40s, Black people, our careers are stalled. And otherwise, we'd be Fortune 500 CEOs. And there's only, 5 or 6 Black ones. Right. So at some point in your career, you have to be derailed. And over my years, I've talked to people that have done super things. I had a friend who was a successful salesperson in an insurance company. He was salesman of the year. And within 3 months after coming back from Hawaii, they gave him a free trip to Hawaii, he was put in a position where he had to leave the company. And it happens to a lot of Black people. And so that's part of the reason why I wrote my book. I wrote my book so that Black people would have a way of securing their future without, trying to be an athlete or an entertainer. And that's basically what happened with my computer company. I was a computer programmer at a young age. Before they had information technology. I was a computer programmer. And back in the 70s, and when I was 25 years old, I made more money than my dad even. So I've had a pretty good successful life in business. And but even with that, winning all these awards, winning Inc. 500 awards, look at all the awards on the walls. I was
Right.
businessman of the year. I was all this stuff. At 45, I was bankrupt. And if I had done what was in my book, I would not have had the problems that I had, because Black people try to start businesses, but we have no foundation. Meaning that I don't know if you know the statistics, but there are 2 million Black businesses in America, but only 100,000 have employees. So 1.9 million Black businesses out there are really just hustles, because if you have no employees, when you get sick, you don't make any money.
Right.
And so in terms of what I talk about in my book is keep, number one, getting as much education as you can so you can get a better job. That's what education is for, to get a good job, to make as much money as you can. And while you're on that job, to buy income property. So you can start with duplexes, fourplexes, and then larger units, and become a landlord, and then you have an additional income. And because right now the average or the median income for Black people, Black families, is about 48,000 a year. For white families, it's about almost 80,000 a year. So we're really behind when it comes to income, and there's good reasons for it. So, but my thing is, if you work on your job, the younger the better, but there's really no age. I started at about 45 years old. If you stay on your job, get a good job, and I state that in my book. There's 4 or 5 things in the end of the book that I point out. But number one is, don't get into crime. Number 2 is get as much education as you can so you can get a good job. Number 3 is, when you get that good job, and when I say a good job, I mean a job with benefits. You want medical, you want dental, you want all of that stuff for your family, because that really reduces the stress in your life.
Yeah.
And a lot of these hustles, I mean, let's face it, if you don't have any employees, you probably don't have much in terms of health insurance, medical insurance, no backup. You get sick, you don't make money. So get a job with benefits. And then while you're on that job, if you don't have a property, buy a duplex, live in one half, rent out the other. Then wait a few years, do a refi, buy maybe another duplex, and now you have your job paying you. Now you have 3 other people paying you, and you get to the point where you would want to buy a home for yourself downstream. I mean, you can do that, but the thing is, you have to stay on your job, this good job. And I talk to people, and I'm in Sacramento, California, and this is kind of a government town, so a lot of people work for the government. I know my wife's family works for the government. I've never worked for the government, but a lot of them do. Those are jobs for life. In other words, you can stay there 40, 45 years and then retire. But while you're on those jobs with governments, you can buy residential income property on the side. And basically you join credit unions, and you don't have to be working for governments to do that. But most credit unions have a first-time home buyer program. And what you do is you start off, you buy a duplex. If you don't have a home, buy a duplex, stay in one unit, get paid from the other unit, and what we did is we had a home. Actually, after I went bankrupt and lost my house, I moved into I got married, and my wife had a condominium, real small condominium. But while we were in the condominium, we were buying apartment buildings. And over a 4-year period, I think we bought 5 properties. And the way I did that is we just, I was in IT. I was no longer working for myself. So there was a lot of income, my overhead was really low. And so I used most of the money I was making to buy properties. But if you don't do that, if you don't have that extra income on the side, it's going to be tough. I mean, you could be making 200, 300,000 a year. And lately, over the last week, we heard about all these high-tech people at, Microsoft and Apple and Google that have been laid off. These are high-income people. And if you're making 200, 300,000 a year and you lose your job, then you're in panic mode. And unfortunately, probably people of color are the first ones laid off. So I really wrote this book for Black people because I want to see more Black people make it financially. And you can do that. We have almost $3 million worth of our net worth, and the median net worth for Black people right now in the United States is about $24,000. It's even worse for Black men. Single Black men, the median net worth is $9,000. And so, without real estate, I don't really see how you can do it. And unfortunately, when we get these jobs and we're making 100,000, 200,000, I've done that before. We normally live up to our income. You know, our we either our rent or our mortgage is 5,000 a month, and we've got our kids in private schools, and we have our Tesla payment is 1,000 a month. Everything seems fine. Then when you get laid off, I mean, you're in panic mode, and that causes, unfortunately, in all communities, but especially for Black communities, a high incidence of divorce. The stress causes everything that we have, high blood pressure, diabetes, and all of that. So I wrote my book because I think it's the only book that I've read, and I've read them all, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich, all of Donald Trump's books before he was president, and we thought he was legit. I've read them all. I mean, my thing in life was to be in business. And even with that, at 45, I was bankrupt. So I talk to people about my book. I've done podcasts before, and I've done interviews. And I don't know of another book that's directed strictly to Black people, Black Americans. Because if you look at the plight of Black Americans, I mean, believe it or not, the net worth of Black people in, I think it's Boston, I think it's $8. The median net worth. And you have a concern when you Google it. And the first thing that comes up on net worth of Black Americans in Boston is this is not a mistake. And when that comes up first, there's an issue. But the median net worth for Black people is 24,000. The median net worth for white people is 189,000.
You bring up some really good points. It reminds me of this book I read. It was written by this lady named Dorothy Brown, who's a tax attorney. And she was talking about just like the inherent bias in, tax law for Black Americans specifically, how if you're married, for instance, usually they don't qualify for, tax breaks. They usually white couples, because if a white couple, because they maybe have sometimes the wife doesn't have to work, because they do get the higher paid management positions and things of that nature. And she was advocating for changes to the tax codes, and she thought that would really help Black Americans.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I think almost everything in this country is against Black people. I mean, from appraisal on homes, on selling homes. And I don't want to really get into why. I mean, there are sociologists and guys like that that write those books. But there's a lot of concerns. And I think I told you before when we were talking on the phone, part of the reason is 80 to 85% of all businesses in America are owned or managed by white people.
Right.
And they decide who is promoted. Now, you can get a job. Like if you get a job at a major Fortune 500 company, they have a quota for the number of maybe minorities they hire. But there's nothing about promoting. So if you're hired and you never get promoted and you're always at the bottom rung, you're not going to be successful, financially successful. And then as soon as there's a layoff, normally it's the people of color that go first. So, but if you do what's in my book, and you have a couple of duplexes and a fourplex on the side, and you're making 7, 8, 9,000 a month on top of your income, and now you're not going to make it, initially. It'll take you years. You have to pay off the mortgages, but you won't get into panic mode when you get laid off, or if you get laid off, and maybe you won't get laid off. But if you don't get laid off, then can you imagine you're making your 4,000 or 5,000 a month? And now you got another 6,000 or 7,000 from your investments. And a lot of people, I know there's people on the internet, Black people talking about, Black people getting into stocks and Bitcoin and all that stuff. But I think it's smoke and mirrors. It's gambling. You know,
What
I
if
think I'm gonna be
live
honest
though?
with you. I'm gonna be honest. One thing about the stock market is it's just until you get a net worth of $500,000 to $1 million, I wouldn't even touch the stock market. I mean, it's a gamble. But go on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, like you talk about investing in real estate, but I was considering like if you live in like certain areas of the country, and you're a Black American, like like for instance, like Southern California, like the real estate is really expensive. Like what would you advise, like for people like who live in like areas of like that, like where it seems like it'd be really expensive to buy a home.
Well, I'm in Sacramento, and it's the property is expensive, but there's always um, available properties, inexpensive properties in areas where the minorities live, where Black people or Hispanics live. There's always uh, properties that you can purchase because they're and I talk about previously depressed properties or areas. There's always properties you can buy, and there's always fixers. I don't advocate flipping property because flippers normally get caught on that last flip. But there's always like, well, when we were buying property, we were buying properties that nobody wanted. In Sacramento, there's an area called Oak Park, which was predominantly Black and Hispanic. Well, there's always properties that you can buy. And in LA, there's probably parts of Compton. There's probably parts of other areas that people don't want to buy because they, basically because there's people of color living there. But there are areas that aren't dangerous as long as it's not dangerous. I mean, I wouldn't, buy a property next to a crack house where they're shooting every day. But in most of these areas, the only reason they're depressed is because Black and brown people live there. They're nice areas. It's just they're lower. The properties are lower valued, but there's always places you can buy. I mean, remember, you don't have to live there, or you don't have to live there that long. And not saying that the properties are that bad. It's just for what I do is I rent to low income people, and I'm like Volkswagen. Volkswagen built the cheapest car in the world, and they own everything. They own they own all the big companies. Well, not Maserati, but they own Volkswagen Group owns all of the fancy brands because they produce the cheapest car in the world, the Volkswagen Buzz, back in the 50s and 60s. And that's what I do. I we have affordable properties. Anybody can afford my property. If you have a job, and then I do Section 8 as well. And right in Sacramento County, there's 52,000 people looking for properties, looking for a place to live from these government programs. Like Section 8, and there are various housing voucher plans, and we utilize that. So if you got 52,000 people waiting for you to buy a place and make it livable and habitable, and if you deal with these programs, you can't be a slumlord because I go through more inspections on my Section 8 property than the average guy. I got a fire inspection. I got a Section 8 inspection. I got the city inspection. So I provide low income housing, and we can do that as a people. We can turn these, the term ghetto is not really apropos because we're really talking about low income areas. And really they're low income and because Black and brown people live there. But my tenants, and I have quite a few tenants, they're great people, you know? And I don't, as a landlord, I don't have a problem with Black people. I mean, I know Black people. Matter of fact, I'm Black. So there's no fear or anything like that. And a lot of white people have a concern with people of color. And I mean, why they have the concern, there could be a million reasons. I don't even want to get into it. But all I know, in every city in America, there are low income areas. There are places you can afford. If you look and you're willing to, maybe fix up a property, I mean, I've seen, I get, I don't know a lot about LA. Normally when I'm in LA, I'm in Malibu. My daughter went to Pepperdine. So I don't know much about LA, but there are places in every city in America that are affordable.
Thank you, Chuck Starks, for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Where can people follow you on social media and buy your book?
Well, basically, my book, Get Rich While Black, is available, at Amazon and Walmart and all of your major book retailers. But I have an email address. I don't really have a website or anything yet. I'm a commercial realtor. I still sell real estate. I sell apartment buildings. But I can be reached just my email address, which is it's easy. It's SAC SACLANDCO at AOL.com.